Part 2. This is a continuation of the story. The link to the first part is in the description of this video. Enjoy watching. I don't really know why I went to that particular restaurant on that particular day. I guess it was just because my usual hangout was closed. I had been to the cafe on a few previous evenings. The Sanitary Cafe closed after 3 p.m. They had a great breakfast and lunch crowd, so I guess they figured they didn't need to be open at night. Even if they were, half their customers wouldn't have shown up. The Sanitary was in a neighborhood best avoided after dark anyway. I was sitting alone in a booth where I probably shouldn't have been at all. Booths were saved for couples when a woman at least 15 years younger than me approached. I could tell from 20 feet away that she was headed for my booth. I tried to place her, but I didn't have a clue. She didn't look at all familiar to me. "Mr. Rollins?" It came out of her mouth as a question. "Yes, ma'am," I said as I stood to greet her. "Please sit down. Would you like to join me? If you wouldn't mind." "Not at all. I hate to eat alone." "You don't remember me, do you?" she asked with a smile. "No, ma'am, I don't." "Well, I sure remember you." I was almost afraid to ask why. "Really? Then we have met before, you might say. You were married to my sister." "My God, are you little Janet?" I was surprised that I hadn't remembered her at least a little. "That's me," she replied. "I'll be damned. I would ask what you've been up to, but I already know. I see your tapes all over the place. I can't go into a convenience store without seeing a rack of them." "You aren't the one who bought a tape, are you?" I asked with a smile. She laughed gently. "Actually, I did buy one once, but I'm afraid your tapes are a little too intense for me." "That is true. I never learned to write for women." "Sure you did. I can recognize your humor pieces in the magazines," she replied. "Now those I like. Why don't you do some of that on tape?" To tell you the truth, it's hard to write humorously for more than 1,000 words. After 10,000, I get downright melancholy. I paused for a few seconds before I asked, "So Janet, how old are you now?" "You're as blunt as ever. You're not supposed to ask a woman her age. Let me see. You were in college when Maggie and I called it quits, so you must be close to 30. "Just about," she lied. "So where is your family?" I asked. "Mom and Dad still live in Andrews. No other family. There used to be a husband, but I kind of misplaced him," she said, grinning broadly. "I was just about to order. If you haven't eaten yet, why don't you stay and eat with me?" "Actually, I finished my dinner, but you go ahead. I would kind of like to talk to you." "If you're sure you don't want anything." "I think I will. I skipped lunch today. Old habits are hard to break." She saw my curious look. "You were always forgetting to eat." Maggie thought that was a great joke. "I expect there were many things about me Maggie found humorous," I said with a bitter edge in my voice. "Well, she doesn't talk much about you anymore, so maybe she doesn't find you so interesting these days." I know you were dying for me to ask, so I said, "How is Maggie?" "She and the lawyer are fighting like cats and dogs, but they will stay together. He can't afford a divorce, and Maggie likes to spend his money." "Did she ever have any kids?" "I really haven't heard anything about her since the divorce. She has 2, and they're both quite a handful." "Why haven't you heard anything about her?" "I mean, she only lives 30 minutes away. I never get over to Andrews unless it's for work. I just don't run in her crowd anymore." "Speaking of that, what are you doing in our little town anyway?" "I live here now. I work for the court system," she replied. "God, not another lawyer," I said, the distaste evident in my voice. "No, I'm a court reporter." "Then you're a state employee?" "Lord, no. I work for myself. All stenographers do." "I didn't know that. So how do you like it?" "I have to like it. It's the only thing I know how to do." "Look, let's talk about you." "A pretty boring subject," I suggested. "I doubt that. So tell me, how did you go from magazine stringer to producing those tapes?" "You left out the words horrid and ghastly from your description of the tapes." I smiled at her, and she returned my smile, also not denying those were her opinions. "I've always tried to write fiction. I met my partner in the tape business 5 years ago. Marty is a sound man for a country band. I was covering a bluegrass festival for a magazine. We got to talking, and one thing led to another. I write the stories and then read them into a tape recorder. Marty cleans up the tape and then copies it. He's also a good salesman and has some really creative ideas, most of which require me to work. What kind of ideas? She asked. Oh, tomorrow, for instance, I'm going to be autographing tapes. Marty read about authors who have book signings, so he thought we should do it. So where is this tape signing? I might want to get your autograph. It's at the mall in Ashboro. You can have my autograph right now and save the long drive. Actually, I might want to buy one of your tapes. I have a present to buy for a friend at the courthouse. He would probably like your tapes. I have plenty of them to sell, I replied with a smile. Actually, I'll bet you sell plenty of them. Almost every new car comes with a tape player now. Between the commuters and the joggers, we sell one or two, I admitted. So how many different tapes do you have? Let me think a minute. I have 4 novels, 6 novellas, and about a dozen redneck mysteries. Are you still writing for magazines? She asked. Sure, that's how I pay the bills. The tapes are really more for fun than anything else. I always wanted to ask a writer, where do you get your characters? Most of them are loosely based on people I've known, or at least people I meet. Is Maggie in any of your stories? She asked with a curious smile. I'm afraid I can't answer that. Maggie and her husband would sue me, I said, breaking into a laugh. They probably would, she agreed. So when did you move here? I know your family all live in Andrews. I got the contract for the courthouse a few months ago, and I moved last week. Then bumping into you is the world's biggest coincidence. I would have expected it to take at least a month. I laughed. This is the world's smallest medium-sized town. I know. I already heard that if you wanted to know anything about anyone, just ask the first person you see on the street. We both laughed gently. That's about the truth. So where are you living? I rented an apartment at the Pines. That's a nice safe place. You shouldn't have any problems out there. What kind of problems would I have? This town has a pretty high burglary rate, probably because so many people work in Andrews. You know they aren't really from here, so the burglars seem to feel it's okay to steal from them. The people who work in Andrews tend to stay there to socialize, so they don't really get known as residents. If you remove them, the population would fall by about half. I have seen a lot of burglaries since I've been here. I hadn't thought about how many, though she paused for a long time. I sensed she had more to say, so I sat quietly. Your name came up at the courthouse last week. Nothing good, I'm sure. Gossip is the lubricant of the court system, I said as a joke. I'm afraid I didn't make her laugh. The policemen don't much like you, she said, as if she were informing me of some new fact. I expect that's because I don't much like them. I heard that too. So how's your love life? She asked, changing the subject. If I had a love life, which I don't think I would discuss it with you. I grinned to show her that I was kidding. Then I guess I'll make something up. I have to tell Maggie about this meeting. I want to make it sound really good. Now, why would you want to do that? I asked. Come on, Ron. What could be more fun than pulling Maggie's chain? I gave it a moment's thought, then said, okay, then you have my permission to make up the most dreadful lie you can think of. I think I'll make her a wealthy country club type. Maybe Buffy? Yeah, that sounds like a good name for your girlfriend. You know, Janet, you have a mean streak. I think I like that about you. Why, thank you, sir, she said with a Southern Belle accent. I know you're signing books tomorrow, but what are you doing the rest of the weekend? You do know it's a holiday. Sure. That's why I'm signing tapes on a Friday. Marty swears the mall will be filled with people. What about Saturday and Sunday? She asked. I have to go to Southport right after the signing. They have some kind of festival and street dance on the 4th. I'm doing a piece on it for a travel magazine. How about you? Me? I'm supposed to go to a cookout with the family tomorrow at lunch, then I have nothing else until Monday morning at 9 o'clock. Why not invite me along for the weekend? I hadn't thought of it, but it would be nice to have some company for a change. I'm afraid you'd never find a motel room, though. What are you doing? Sleeping on the beach? No, but I made my reservations 3 months ago. Go. I mean, it's not stupid. I could stay with you, that is, if you haven't become a troublemaker or anything. There's no real concern in your voice. No, but what would your family say? I mean, it might be innocent, but they would never believe it. I guess I just won't tell them. God knows I'm old enough to go to the beach with a man. If I were any other man, they probably would agree with you. In my case, you'll catch flack if they ever find out. When was the last time you talked to any member of my family? The day I signed the divorce papers. So if I'm not going to tell and you never see them, how on earth are they going to find out? You have a point. Are you still driving that old beat-up Land Cruiser? No, it died on me a few years ago. I replaced it with an International Scout. Sounds like a farm truck, she giggled. I guess it is at that. I need it sometimes to get to those far-off places I write about. What far-off places? I'll bet you haven't written about any place over 500 miles from here. And how would you know that? I asked. I keep up with you a little. I told you I had read some of your writing. You need a four-wheel drive to get to some of the places within 500 miles. I was just kidding. I read the piece you did on the ghost town in the mountains. I liked it, by the way. Do you ever go back there? No, but I'm going to retire there one of these days, I said with a smile. So what time do we leave tomorrow? If you're serious, be at the Ashboro Mall around 3. I hope to wind down then, if not at least by 5. I think I'll go home and pack. By the way, we're taking my car, she said as a weak order. I could have contradicted her, but I just nodded. Leaving the Scout in the mall parking lot wouldn't be a problem. Nobody in their right mind would steal that piece of junk. I should have worked on a new tape for Marty, but when I got home, the most I could manage was to have a drink. I drank the Jim Beam and Pepsi slowly because I was cutting down on my drinking. I was down to 4 very weak drinks a night. I probably consumed no more than 4 ounces in the evening. For me, that was just a drop. The slight amount of alcohol had no effect on my writing. Back when I was a heavier drinker, I thought it helped, until I read some of the pages when sober. I had gone back to tape all my old novels and short stories, and when I read them sober, I was forced to rewrite almost all of them. Taping them required that I buy a fancy cassette recorder. Marty had insisted that it was the very least quality tape he could work with. Marty was a whiz with that kind of thing. He had installed a boom mic over my computer so that I could read the material right from the screen. He even had a kill switch for me to do the most basic of editing. When he got the tape, he would run it through some kind of computer process until it came out clean. Marty took on the partnership because he needed something to do during the week. The band played over the weekends, so he was on the road most every weekend. He worked on our tapes when he wasn't traveling. It actually helped. He pitched the tapes everywhere he went. Marty had built up a pretty good business for himself and a kind of cult following for me. Our customers were mostly truck drivers and salesmen, but lately, we had begun making inroads into the joggers. They were a slightly more upscale crowd, so I was surprised they bought the content I produced. I was even more surprised when Marty informed me that most joggers were middle-class, middle-aged women. It never occurred to me that women would buy my work, as Janet had said it was a little too loaded with bravado. Marty and his band were on the road over the weekend of the 4th, so I set up in the mall alone. I set up in the wrong place, according to the mall manager. She moved me from the entrance of the bookstore to the very center of the mall, by the fountain. I managed to convince her to allow me to move a few feet to avoid the fountain spray. The small card table and folding lawn chair had seen many of these events. I was as comfortable as I was likely to get. When the mall doors opened at 9 o'clock, I sat like a statue, surrounded by 3 large boxes of tapes. I remained in that position for over 2 hours before anyone stopped by. The sign on my easel usually attracted a few people. It read, "Meet the author of the acclaimed Redneck Mystery Series." Acclaimed by whom? Marty never told me. On the card table, along with the boxes of tapes, were 3 Walkman tape players, so people could preview our demo tape before actually purchasing it. The demo story ran 18.5 minutes, but most people never got through it. They either bought a 6-pack or fled in horror. With the 6-pack, customers got 6 Redneck Mysteries, each about an hour long. The demo tape was free, so if you were going to own the tape, why waste time listening to it in the mall? The 6-pack sold for $10, of which Marty and I split the $7 profit. I never made much at the signings, but it helped increase our novel and mail order businesses. The 6-packs could be sold as individual tapes at $2 each, but most people opted for the 6-pack. Some new customers tried one tape before investing in the 6-pack, but most went for it all. I sold and signed 10 6-packs and even a couple of novels. It seemed I already had a fan in Ashboro. At least the woman who bought them as a gift for her trucker husband swore he was a fan. Things were going well when Janet arrived. I explained that I couldn't leave until 5 o'clock. In that case, I'm going to do a little shopping. I'll check back with you. It was a busy afternoon. I continued to have people drift by to listen to the demo. I had thick enough skin not to be upset when some people walked away without buying anything. I recognized the soft-spoken bleached blonde who stood in front of the table around 4 p.m. She had bought a single redneck mystery tape earlier. Since she smiled at me, I was less concerned than I might have been. I hated it when people tried to return a tape after having played it at home. "Mr. Rollins, you are Mr. Rollins?" she asked with that smile. "Yes, ma'am. What can I do for you?" "My husband listened to your tape. He sent me back to ask about carrying them in our restaurant. We have a lot of truckers stopping there, and he thought he might buy a few to put by our register. Marty Wilson is my distributor. I can have him call you. Why don't you write your number down for me?" "Sure. Do you have any idea what kind of deal we can make? We are a pretty small business, and we can't afford to tie up a lot of money. Marty takes care of all that, but I don't think you have to buy a lot of tapes, and we do have a buyback policy if you decide they aren't selling. We buy them back from you." "That sounds good to me. We just can't afford to get stuck with anything. I know it's like that with most of our dealers." She walked away more confident than when she arrived. She also left with a six-pack. "Okay, who was that?" Janet asked, only half kidding. "Someone who wants to become a dealer," I replied. "Oh," Janet said. "So, you about ready?" I looked at my watch. I had to be out of the mall by 5 o'clock, and I still had a half hour to go. I have to stay 15 more minutes. "Well, use that time to autograph a tape for me." "Sure. Which one do you want?" "The one with the least amount of violence." "There are none without at least a little violence in them. I do have one without a murder, though." I sorted through the loose tapes until I found Indian Summer Night. I signed the insert card and handed it to her. "So what's it about?" Her good mood seemed to have returned. "It's about an hour," I replied seriously. "God, you are such a smart aleck," she said with a great smile. "Just for that, I'm going to play it on the drive to the beach." "Oh God, do I have to listen to my own voice all that way?" "If I have to suffer, then so do you." She had switched from the suspicious mood when she first returned to being really upbeat. The mood swing didn't really bother me. I didn't know her well enough to know what she might be like on an ordinary day. It was, after all, a holiday weekend. At 4:45, I packed everything onto my hand truck and rolled it to the Scout. I placed the whole batch into the cargo area, covering it with a tarp to hide it. After locking the doors carefully, I looked for Janet's car. She almost ran me down as she pulled up beside me. I was surprised to find that she was driving a beautifully restored 1965 Ford Mustang convertible. The car was dark blue with a white top, which she had folded down. "It's going to be a little windy," I suggested. "Then don't bring anything that will blow away. Give me your key so I can put my bags in the trunk." Rather than speak, the trunk magically opened. I put my half-sized black canvas duffel bag into the trunk. "Bring some more of those tapes. It's a 4-hour drive to the beach," she ordered. Rather than answer, I pushed the tarp back and removed a six-pack from the box. I hoped she wouldn't really want to listen to the tapes all the way to the beach. She forgot all about the tapes as we talked. Actually, we almost screamed over the sound of the rushing wind. She finally stopped around 6 o'clock to put the top up. It got a little too chilly for a top-down ride. It was easier to talk with the ragtop in a closed position. "So, Ron, what kind of piece are you writing?" "It's one of those July 4th kind of pieces." She simply nodded. Thanks to her rather heavy foot, we arrived at our small motel outside Southport shortly before 9 o'clock. After tossing our bags into the room, we drove downtown. The streets had already been blocked off for the dance, and we could hear the band before we even parked the car. We hiked the 2 blocks to the town square and found that the crowd was thick and lively. I didn't mind either, but I noticed Janet's eyes sparkling with excitement. "Are you all right?" I asked, concerned that she might be feeling anxious. "I'm fine. I just get a little nervous in crowds. Just stay close, and I will be fine." She stayed close to me for the remainder of the evening. I simply made observations as we moved through the crowd. Janet lightened up a little after she began to navigate through the throngs of people at my side. Eventually, she even asked me to dance. While we danced, I made mental notes on the festivities. I talked to a couple selling hot dogs for a while, and Janet stayed close beside me. I went to the booth selling beer. Even though I didn't like beer, I bought one just to chat with the vendor. I was busy making notes in my head while he talked about his regular job as a shrimper. He and his wife ran the beer vending booth just this one time a year. Janet and I wandered to the street set aside for arts and crafts vendors, and there were almost no tourists in that area. I could feel Janet relax as we left the crowded street. We stood before a young woman and her husband while Janet fingered the jewelry. I asked them about the day's events that I had missed, and the two of them gave me a full rundown on the boat parade and the games in the town square. Janet and I stayed around until they closed the dance at midnight with a giant fireworks display. It was beautiful, and I was glad I had stayed. I encouraged Janet to remain until the crowd had dispersed because I wanted to see what the place looked like after all the tourists had left. As I had expected, the streets were littered with trash. I caught up with a street sweeper just as he began sweeping the street with a large push broom. "So, how many pounds of trash did the tourists leave this year?" I asked. "Looks like a ton or more," he said with a smile. "Don't mind though. They left about as much money, and they'll be back tomorrow." The beach down there will be filled with either sunburned or fair-skinned women. "No offense, ma'am," Janet shook her head. "Well, I guess we'll be heading to the motel. Anything going to be happening around here?" I asked. "Just a bunch of us going to Captain John's for breakfast. You know the town people who worked on this show. I don't suppose they would let a couple of tourists in?" "No, it's closed to tourists. How about if I grab a broom and help you clean the street?" "Why in the world would you want to do that?" "I was born to sweep streets," I said as I picked up a broom from the rear of the town's pickup truck. "Well, I'm not just going to stand around watching," Janet said as she picked up a broom too. I was glad to see that she was back to her usual self. The three of us made short work of the litter. We even moved to help one of the other sweepers on a different street, filling the back of a 1-ton truck with all the litter. "So, did we earn the right to go to breakfast with you guys?" I asked. "Sure. I expect the city can pay for 2 more breakfasts." Captain John's was as I had expected, a restaurant near the water. There was no ocean view, but the parking lot smelled strongly of the ocean at low tide. In other words, it was a bit briny. I spent the 90 minutes engaging everyone I could in conversation. I learned a lot about the planning and logistics of the festival and about the next day's planned events. When Janet and I arrived back at the motel, we were both too beat to do anything except fall into bed. Actually, separate beds. I slept the kind of deep sleep reserved for those who had been working hard, and it felt good. When I awoke, it was to the smell of coffee. Janet had gone out to buy coffee and biscuits, and she was kind enough to turn away while I dressed. After we went through the food, I realized that it was 10 o'clock in the morning. I had slept about 3 hours longer than usual and had also been awake 4 hours later than usual. I figured I was an hour behind in my sleeping schedule. "What's today's plan?" Janet asked. "I guess we go to the beach. I want to interview a few of the tourists, and that's where they will be. Then you go take your shower. I'll dress out here." "Sounds like a first-class plan to me," I replied as I moved toward the bathroom. I spent a long time in the shower. I wanted all the cobwebs gone before heading to the beach. I dressed in gym shorts and a white t-shirt. When I exited the bathroom, I found Janet standing by the mirror, working on her hair. It was the first time I really noticed her. She was tall and thin, probably somewhere near 58 or 59. She had slightly flared hips, but nothing particularly striking. In the mirror, I could see her face was quite pleasant, attractive in a natural way. Her hair was a shade of chestnut, probably aided by a rinse, but it looked good on her. She glanced up into the mirror and saw me staring at her. "So, what do you think?" she asked, striking a pose. "Well, you could use a few more pounds, but all in all, not bad." "Not bad? Hell, men have fought over this body," she giggled. "Yeah, well, men have fought over a lot less too," I said with a smile. "Ron, you can take the fun out of anything," she said, smiling back. "I do try. So how much longer are you going to primp?" "Damn you, I'm finished. Let's go talk to the tourists." Janet pulled on a terry cloth robe as we headed to her car. She found the beach without any help from me, which didn't impress me since there were giant signs everywhere. She lay on a beach towel in the sun while I went from one tourist to another. I talked to tourists for a couple of hours, and then returned to find Janet in conversation with a man about her age. I almost kept moving but decided to say something when I heard her say, "You have to leave now. That's my boyfriend." The young man took one look at me and then walked away. I sat down in the sand beside her towel. "Why did you tell him I was your boyfriend?" "I just wanted to get rid of him. Besides, for this weekend, you are at least kind of." "I'm your brother-in-law," I replied, slightly bewildered. "Ex-brother-in-law, and I have it on good authority that it no longer counts." "Really? Who is the authority?" "Inlanders, of course," she said with a bright smile. "Well, you have me there. You certainly have to be the final word on what is socially acceptable. So, are we ready for lunch?" "I don't know about lunch, but I'm ready to get out of the sun. How about a shrimp salad at Captain Tom's?" Like I said, anything to get out of this bright sunshine. Captain Tom's had lost its intimate feeling. I expected the 150 tourists crammed into a 100-seat restaurant did that. "Bad idea," Janet said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Good. I saw McDonald's as we came in last night." "Let's go there," I agreed. Even the McDonald's was packed. "Remind me to ask one of the locals where they eat during the summer," I suggested. "Do that. I don't think I can stand another crowd like this one." We ended up going through the drive-thru and then took the food to our room at the motel. We sat on the balcony and ate the greasy burgers. "So how many more interviews do you need?" Janet asked. "I probably have enough, except for the chief of police or at least one of the police officials. We can probably catch someone after lunch. If all goes well, we'll finish by 2. Do you want to stick around for a while or head home?" "I'd like to stay if we can avoid the crowds." "Then we need to head up to Ritzville. It will be crowded there too, but not as bad." "We will never find a room up there," she suggested. "It's only a 90-minute drive. We can stay here and just spend the evening up there." "Okay, but I warn you, I plan to be home and in bed by 11 o'clock. Last night was too much for me." "Me too. I'm getting too old to stay up all night." I finished the interview within minutes of catching the captain of the day shift. I found him in his office on the top floor of City Hall, which was a white, 2-story colonial mansion converted into offices. It was the classiest city hall I had ever seen. I learned that no one was really arrested at these festivals. Mostly, it was about calming down an excited tourist or taking a drunk back to their motel, but nothing more. "Well, that's that. I'm finally finished," I said when I returned to the car. "Good. Do we have to go to the beach again?" "I'm really tired." "Not at all. What would you like to do?" "I know this sounds stupid, but I'd like to take a nap," she said sheepishly. "That doesn't sound stupid at all. As a matter of fact, it sounds like a great idea." When we arrived back at the room, I pulled the coverlet back and fell onto the bed. I was sound asleep before Janet returned from the bathroom. I awoke around 6 to find her gone. I didn't pay much attention to her absence. I simply took a quick shower and dressed in long pants for the evening. When Janet returned an hour later, she was dressed in a different swimsuit. "You better get a move on. We need to get to Ritzville early if we are going to find a place to eat." "No problem," she said, disappearing into the bathroom. When she emerged half an hour later, she was dressed in black slacks and a white silk blouse. "God, you look radiant." "I always look good in silk," she said with a warm smile. When we got to Ritzville, every restaurant in town was packed. "What the hell? We might as well go to this one," she said, despite the line out the door. The crowd didn't seem to bother her at all. We waited for a table, along with 50 other people. She was all smiles and small talk, even with the others waiting. Something had relaxed her during my nap. After dinner, she even suggested we go dancing. I carried her to the holiday lounge, where the people were as thick as flies. Janet didn't seem to be bothered at all. She danced beautifully, with a lot more rhythm than I had. Finally, around midnight, we left for home. "I don't know what got into you, but I approve," I said as we drove through the hot, humid night air. "Nothing has gotten into me," she snapped. "Hey, I was just saying you seem to be more relaxed." "I know. It's just that I feel more comfortable around you." We both knew it was more than that, but I didn't follow up on it because, frankly, I didn't care enough to fight about it. I recognized that something about her was a little off-center, but then her whole family was a little out of sorts. We were back in the motel room when she said, So I guess it's back to the grind tomorrow? No way to avoid it, I replied. It's been fun, Ron. For me too, I replied. I waited for her to make a move to the bathroom so that I could undress. She put it off a few minutes longer, then disappeared into the bathroom. I hadn't fallen asleep when she returned. I heard her get into the bed across from mine. I guess it was the nap that made me sleep so lightly. I heard her rise from the bed, open the door, and then disappear into the night. I almost followed her but decided against it. She was, after all, of age to do whatever she wanted. I could only guess she had met someone by the pool while I napped. That would certainly explain her sudden relaxation. They say socializing does relieve stress. I was asleep when she returned. I had no idea what time she arrived back in the room. I awoke the next morning to her voice. She was standing by my bed. Wake up, Ron. I want to get an early start. I looked at my watch and found it to be 7 a.m. It was early for a vacationing couple to be up and around. I showered and then dressed as she nervously paced the floor. I should have asked her about her sudden renewed attack of nerves, but frankly, I just didn't care. I would be home and away from her in a few hours. I sure as hell didn't plan to spend any more time with her. Maybe the occasional lunch, but certainly nothing more. I was home in my little studio a few days later when the doorbell chimed, interrupting the sentence I was working on for the latest mystery novel. I exited my small studio and went through the equally small living room. The woman and man standing on my doorstep were definitely cops of some kind. Something about a cop on your doorstep makes them easy to identify, even in their cheap suits. Hell, maybe it was the cheap suits. I opened the front door of my little house. Yes? I asked. Are you Ron Rollins? The man asked. Yes, I replied. Mr. Rollins, I am Detective Amos, and this is Detective Evers. We are from the Southport Police. You guys are a long way from home. Come on in. I think I have some coffee on the stove. It isn't more than a few hours old. None for us, the woman said. Okay then, it's coffee for one, I said as I walked into the postage stamp kitchen. They followed behind, as I knew they would. So what can I do for the Southport PD? I actually wrote a nice piece about you. Oh, the woman asked. I was down for the 4th festival. Wait here, and I'll get you the piece I wrote. I went into the studio and found a copy of the article. It hadn't been published at the time, but I had a draft copy from my computer. It took the woman only a few minutes to read the 2,000-word article. Nice, she said. So you were down there researching this? That's right. So what's going on? Were you alone? The man asked. No, actually I had a friend along with me. We need her name and address, the man said. Not unless you tell me why, I said, losing my good attitude. The two of them glanced at each other, deciding if it was time to spill the beans. There was a man killed in the motel where you were staying. We are checking everyone who was at the motel. When did it happen? I asked. Saturday night, I believe. You left early Sunday morning, quite early. I don't suppose you heard anything that night? The woman asked. No, I am usually a pretty sound sleeper, I admitted. Well, we need to talk to your friend. She might have seen or heard something, the woman suggested. Sure, I said, as I gave them Janet's name and address. I understand you were a cop, the man asked. I was also a Democrat once. What's your point? They tell us downtown you would be capable of killing the young man, the woman suggested. I might be capable, but I didn't. I didn't even meet any of the other guests at the motel. Your friend met a lot of them, the man said with a smirk. What the hell does that mean? I asked angrily. It means she was chatting with several of them by the pool Saturday afternoon. It also means she went into a room with two of them, one of whom happened to be the victim. That's pretty interesting, but what does it have to do with me? I asked. Maybe you found out and lost your temper, he suggested. Maybe I didn't find out and wouldn't have cared anyway, I said. Why wouldn't you have cared? The woman asked. Because she wasn't then and isn't now my girlfriend. She is the sister of my ex-wife. She invited herself along on that trip. We went as family, not as lovers. That sounds pretty weak to me, the woman said. She told the other man she had to be careful of her boyfriend, the man added. You were the jealous type, he said. She called me her boyfriend at the beach, I retorted. She told me then it was to get rid of an unwelcome advance. I knew how lame it sounded. These weren't unwelcome advances according to the man who spent an hour with her in the motel room. Janet is over 21. I don't think spending time with a man is a crime. Not spending time with a man, but murder is a crime, the woman stated. I can't help you. I didn't know what she was up to and I wouldn't have cared, I replied honestly. Everyone stopped talking, waiting for me to say something. Usually, a suspect has to keep the air filled with words. When he does, he will eventually trip himself up on a lie. I waited them out. Finally, the woman broke. Do you own a straight razor? Are you kidding? Look at this beard. What the hell would I do with a razor of any kind? I take that as a no, she said seriously. You can take it any way you want. I just do not happen to own a razor of any kind. Would you be willing to take a polygraph? The man asked. Would you be willing to kiss my butt on Main Street at high noon? I snapped. I take it that is a no, he said angrily. Like I said before, you can take it any way you want. Try this one then. Did you kill that man? The woman asked bluntly. Ask anyone around here. If I had killed him, I would have lit him up. I don't much like sharp things. I guess we will be going then, the man said. I don't suppose it would do any good to ask you not to call and warn this Janet? Not a bit. You going to find a lawyer with her? That is if you find her at all. I had been running the weekend over in my mind. It was more than possible that she had killed the man. She had acted strangely enough. What the cops didn't understand was that she would be at the courthouse surrounded by a dozen lawyers. I called her at work. She was in the courtroom, so I left her a message to call me as soon as possible. I even tagged it urgent. She didn't call for several hours, so I knew the cops found her before she had a chance to call. When I did hear from her, she was standing on my stoop. Did the police talk to you? She asked. As a matter of fact, they did. I suppose you have been with them the last 3 hours. God, yes. They think you killed a man at the motel. I did my best to cover for you. There is nothing to cover. I never even met the man. She ignored me. The cops think you killed him in a fit of jealousy. I told them that was ridiculous. I explained that you never left the room that night since we slept in separate beds. That isn't going to hold up. What do you mean separate beds? We were together in the same bed all night. I couldn't tell whether she believed her own lie or not. Maybe she was using it as an alibi, or maybe she believed it. Either way, she was acting erratically. Janet, I know you were trying to help, but you have to tell them the truth, I said, trying to determine what she was thinking. That is the truth. She paused for a long moment, then added, some man at the motel has me confused with another woman, or he is telling the most horrible lies about me. That woman cop thinks I went into a room with 2 men. She even described the most horrible things I am supposed to have done. You know, Ron, I would never be unfaithful to you. Not like that sister of mine. Janet was working herself into a state. Take it easy, Janet. I know you aren't like Maggie. I hope she would calm down. You know, I'll bet that was Maggie down there. It would be just like her to do the things that detective described. I took a good look at Janet and found her eyes darting again. Sure, Maggie would do anything to stir trouble. God, she is such a mess. I don't know how you put up with her for so long. She might even have killed that man. God knows she is capable of anything. You didn't suggest that to the cops, did you? I asked calmly. Of course not. She is a handful and probably a troublemaker, but she is family. Her words hit home. Janet might be a handful and a troublemaker, but she was family. I had to think, but it was hard with her rambling. I wanted to scream, shut up, but I figured that might not be such a good idea. The first thing I had to determine was what she had told the detectives. Janet, honey, I need for you to tell me what the cops asked you. Honey, it is important, I said as calmly as I could manage, with my own heart racing a mile a minute. They asked me why you said you weren't my boyfriend. I told them about my family and how they would react if it got out. Then I told them that we had slept in the same bed and that I knew you didn't kill anyone. Her words were calm but hollow sounding. Did they ask you if you had met the murdered man? Sure. I told them I might have. I was, after all, at the pool while you napped. I explained that I was helping you with your article, so I had talked to a lot of people. Okay, being seen together was covered. What did you tell them when they asked if you went into the room with the 2 men? I asked you aren't going to be mad, are you, Ron? No, baby, I am not going to be mad. I told them I went into the room to see a seashell. I know I shouldn't have gone into another man's room, but honest, Honey, it was just to see the seashell. I know, sweetie. That one was covered. Now it was pretty much one man's word against hers. I told them I ran out of the room when one of them tried to touch me. I did. Honest, Ron. I wouldn't let anyone else touch me. There she was, getting agitated again. It's okay, baby. I know you wouldn't do anything wrong, I said. She had somehow found her way into my arms. I held her while she cried. Honest, Ron, I didn't mean for it to happen. I just wasn't thinking, she said through her tears. I didn't know what she meant by it, but I did know that I didn't want to know. Janet, honey, this is important. When you went into the room to see the seashell, was it the dead man's room? Yes, she answered more calmly. So much for explaining away any fingerprints in the room. If she didn't say anything else, she was pretty much covered. I figured a smart lawyer could defend her, but I didn't want her to go to trial. She might actually get acquitted without my testimony. That is, if she didn't take the stand. I didn't want her to get acquitted of murder. She most definitely didn't need to be walking around free, but I also didn't want some overzealous DA to put her on death row. What she needed was a hospital stay, not a prison sentence. She pulled away from me and said, as though nothing had happened, "Where are you taking me for dinner?" I had dealt with enough unpredictable situations when I was a cop to know how to handle her. I don't know. What do you feel like? I would like to have a pizza delivered. Then what about your plan? She was smiling again, and her eyes had stopped darting around. The pizza sounds good, but the other may have to wait. I am feeling a little tired tonight, I said, trying to keep her calm. You order the pizza, and it'll go change, she said, totally ignoring me. Okay. I had to wonder what she would change into since she had no clothes at my house and none with her. When she returned to the kitchen, she was dressed only in the white silk blouse she had worn to work. When she sat down, I realized the blouse was absolutely the only thing she wore. After the pizza arrived, we sat at the kitchen table making small talk. I would ordinarily have had a drink or three, but that night I kept the bottle hidden. I wanted to keep my wits about me, and I certainly didn't want her drinking. Come on, she said. I want to watch TV. We sat on my small sofa. She moved until she was pressed tightly against me. I put my arm around her. She seemed to be enjoying the TV program. I, on the other hand, was trying to figure out what to do with her. Not just tonight, but for years to come. Come on, Ron. It's bedtime, she said, pulling me from the sofa. I followed her into my small bedroom, where she removed the blouse before I could stop her. She actually was a beautiful woman. I had all kinds of excuses planned to avoid being intimate with her, but they proved unnecessary. She seemed to have forgotten all about that. Believe me, I was thankful. The thought of anything else scared the hell out of me. She curled up beside me and fell into a blissful sleep. As you can imagine, I didn't sleep at all. She left early the next morning. It would never do for her to arrive at work in the same outfit as the day before. Men are such pigs. They would get the wrong idea, she said with a smile. I called Dr. Briner at exactly 9. I told his receptionist that it was an emergency, and I saw him at 10. Briner was a psychiatrist I had dealt with as a cop on occasion. I would transport one of his indigent patients to the hospital in Andrews. When I was seated, I asked, "You don't remember me, do you?" "No." "Have you been a patient before?" "No, and I am not one now. I have a story to tell you. Please listen." I went on to tell him all of it. When I finished, he didn't say a word. He moved to the wall behind him, removed a book, then sat down at his desk. I can't make a diagnosis without talking to her, but I can tell you this. She will do it again, and she has probably done it before. I was afraid of that. It is possible that this was her first. She may have been dormant until she met you again. It is possible that she just had some kind of fixation on you from the time of your marriage to her sister. As long as you two stayed apart, she might have just fantasized about you. No telling how many different emotions are tied up in her view of you. The fact that she wouldn't have any close relationship with you, but would leave your bed to be with another man, then kill him, is pretty classical. So what can we do to keep her out of jail? I don't know. A voluntary commitment can be reversed at any time. She could show up on your doorstep a week or a year from now. If she goes to trial, then she may go to jail. Those prosecution experts never find anyone insane. I can't let her go to jail. She is sick, not a criminal. Murder is a crime, you know, he said. I know, But she is sick. She might never get any better. A life sentence is a life sentence, he reminded me. Can her family afford a private clinic? I doubt it. Then the prison system would be no worse than the state hospital. It isn't exactly a picnic over there. I know it galls you, Ron, but you may have to play by the rules this time. I gave him a curious look. Shrinks don't live in a vacuum. Your history is well known to me. I was frankly surprised to find you in the appointment book. Sorry I disappointed you. Not at all. I would have been disappointed had you needed my services. So what are you going to do about this, Janet? I don't have any idea, except I am not going to be the one to put her into the system. You may be the only one who can help her. Then she is going to stay out of trouble. When I arrived home, the Southport detectives were parked outside my house. I walked past them without speaking. I knew they would be at my door before I could unlock it. I turned back when I had the door open to allow them to enter ahead of me. It looks like you and the girl are each other's alibi. That is downright convenient, the woman said. Why didn't you tell us you were involved with her like she told you? I didn't want her family to know. One of you killed that man, then it should be easy to prove. You know he had been with her just before he died. I can't prove it was she who was with him, but I know it, I replied. I think you stormed into the room and attacked him, the man said. If you think that, you should arrest me, I snapped. The only reason I don't is Agnes thinks she killed him, some kind of delusion. I didn't trust myself to respond. You know, if that's true, it's just a matter of time before she does, the woman said. Well, Agnes, that would be my problem, wouldn't it? You know that when she does, she is going to jail. The only difference between now and then is that you are going to be dead. Like I said, that would be my problem. Give us a break here, Ron, the man suggested. If all Southport cops are as stupid as you, the town must be overrun with crooks and killers. If the best theory you can come up with is that one day, out of the blue, Janet turns into some kind of femme fatale, you need help? Now, if you don't mind, I need to get to work. I had given them their clue. Now it was a race to see if they could find another incident before I either found a solution to the dilemma or she caused more trouble. I struggled with my problem for the next 2 days without hearing a word from Janet. I hoped she had moved on to something or someone else, but no such luck. She showed up on my doorstep around 7 in the evening on the 3rd day. Sorry I am late. Court ran a little over. Not only did she show up, she brought one of those hanging dress bags with her. She entered the house and said, I can't find my key. I guess it's buried somewhere in my bag. I am sorry to bother you. I know you must have been working. No problem. I need to take a break anyway, I replied, trying to figure out her mindset. She went directly to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of iced tea. You know, I am beat. How about we go out to dinner? Sure. What would you like? I know you hate fancy places. How about Dee's? It's a family restaurant I seldom visit. Sure. Give me a minute to save my work. Dinner was good, and best of all, Janet acted normally. All in all, it was a pretty uneventful evening until we got home. So, what would you like to do? Janet asked playfully. Whatever you want is fine with me, I said with what I hoped was a warm smile. Then come with me. I have a surprise for you. She pulled me to the bedroom and revealed a small tattoo on her left shoulder. The tattoo was a small heart with the name Ron in the center of it. This is getting too bizarre, I thought. So do you like it? She asked. It's beautiful, I said, but I think the man who did it enjoyed it a bit too much. He kept touching me while he worked on it. He was probably just trying to get it flat enough to tattoo, she said. You're probably right. His wife was in the room the whole time. She stood by my dresser mirror admiring it for a long time. I think I might have something on the other shoulder, you know, a butterfly or something. Whatever you want, honey, I said, going along with it. I was thinking something entirely different. I was thinking this girl is really a handful. I knew I should confront her about the situation in Southport, but I still felt that somewhere there was a better solution. It would come to me if I could stay alive long enough. That's why I love you, Ron. You let me do whatever I want. Do you know what I want right now? She asked. No, honey, what do you want? I asked, but didn't really want to know. I want to go to bed with you just like before. She curled up against me, then fell sound asleep. I even drifted off myself. The hanging clothes bag held her dress for the next day. She kissed me gently as she walked from the room. I realized it was the first time we had ever kissed. It wasn't much of a kiss, more of a quick peck. I thought about Janet all day. It came to me around 4 in the afternoon. Janet was trying to become Maggie, who had a history of poor choices and had been involved with every man who ever showed interest. I wondered why she would want to be like Maggie. I called the doctor at home. He suggested that it was something from her childhood. He had a guess, but it was just that. It's so vague, I'm not even going to tell you. You might want to take a look at Maggie's relationship with her father. When Janet didn't show by 7, I called Maggie. I drove to her new house an hour later. I met with Maggie and her husband. I gave Eddie $1 so that he would be bound by the client oath. I told it all to Maggie, who was more or less sober. At least she was sober enough to listen. Believe it, when she finally did believe it, she begged me not to turn her sister in. The doctor who was helping me tried to figure out something for Janet and said to ask you about your and Janet's relationship with your father. What do you mean? She snapped. What did Janet tell you about that? Nothing, and that's the problem. There is some reason she is trying to become you. Breener thinks it has something to do with your relationship with your father. Maggie said with a composed look. Her story wasn't any better or worse than hundreds of other children. Her father was one of the few who actually had given more love and pampered Maggie. He never treated Janet the same way. Somehow, Janet felt betrayed by it. Maggie and I want to see Dr. Breener, she said. The next day, she told it all to him. I asked him about an idea I had. Come on, Ron. I can't do that, he said. Doc, you can't put her away now. You said yourself she is likely to do it again. I may be the next one. This may not work, but then again, it might do something. You were talking about bringing a crisis on. That would be very unprofessional of me. Dr. Breener, I love my sister. I don't want to see her in prison or worse. If this might help, I am begging you to try it, the sober Maggie said. Okay, he agreed, a lot less enthusiastic than I would have liked. None of us knew what might happen when we arranged the meeting in the doctor's office at 6 o'clock that same evening. Maggie, the doctor, and I were already assembled when Janet came. Seeing Maggie and me in the same room caused her eyes to dance. What are you doing with that loser? Janet asked. Janet, why are you saying that about me? I am your sister, and I love you. Ron, get away from her. You know you don't love her anymore. Janet, I never loved anyone else but Maggie. I'm sorry if you misunderstood. Maggie and I are going to get back together. You can't take him away from me. I won't let you take another one from me, Janet said as she reached into her bag. She pulled out a straight razor and then charged at Maggie. I have to give Maggie this. She knew it might happen, but she had gone through with the charade anyway. I caught Janet from behind and pinned her arm while I wrestled the razor from her. I picked up a nasty little slice for my reward. Nobody could have guessed what would happen next. Janet collapsed on the floor. I would have expected her to begin crying or cursing. Instead, she began to rock like a child. She also started mumbling to herself. The doctor knelt beside her. Janet, honey, are you all right? He asked. No, I am not all right. Daddy, why do you love Maggie more than me? I am also your daughter. Why do you love her and not me? Janet, my name is Dr. Breener. I am a doctor, honey. I am not your father. Do you understand? Take me home, Daddy. I don't like it here. Take me home. Maggie wept softly while Janet tried to convince the doctor to take her home. An hour later, the ambulance left for a private clinic somewhere in the mountains of North Carolina. So, Doc, what are her chances? I asked. Who knows? She may come out of it, and she may not. He turned his attention to Maggie. Do you need to talk in detail about what had happened in your childhood that might have changed Janet? Not right now. Maybe later, she said as she picked up her bag. Walk me to my car, Ron. As I stood beside the car door, I said, I am sorry. You should be. You are the only one who got what you wanted. You beat the system again. She said it without any malice this time. I am glad you did. I watched her drive away. If doing the right thing is its own reward, why did I feel so lousy? Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share,